Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reducing Backup and Disaster Recovery Storage Costs On-Prem and in the Cloud. Today's webinar is sponsored by Quest and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Keith Ward. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I'm really excited to be your moderator for this special event today. But before we get to today's content, there's a couple of housekeeping items I need to go over to help you get the most out of this session. Batting leadoff, we want your questions. We also want to know where you're logging in from today, so tell us in that questions panel on your screen. Now, that Q&A panel that you see there is also the place to let us know about any technical issues you might be experiencing. First thing you want to do if you're having problems seeing or hearing anything is a browser refresh. Just refresh your window there, and that should take care of it. If that doesn't work, well, try one more browser refresh. Sometimes, believe it or not, a couple of refreshes are necessary. If that still doesn't work, let us know in that Q&A, and we will help you out. All right. Also, right next to that questions tab is the handouts section. And there you will find numerous fantastic resources. I'd especially like to call your attention today to a special PDF from Quest on how to reduce backup storage costs in the cloud with Quest Core Store. You're going to hear a lot more about Core Store today too. Now there you'll also find a link to the Gorilla Guide Book Club where you can get access to our great printed resources on technology topics. You'll also find a link to the ATM Event Center, which has our calendar of upcoming events. We've got a lot of really good stuff that I think might interest you. If you see something you like, well, sign up and join us on another one. All right. Third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant, which might be you. Now, you do have to be in attendance during the entire live event to qualify for the prize. The official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handouts section. And finally, one of the best benefits of this or any Actual Tech Media event is the opportunity to ask questions of our expert presenters. To help encourage those questions, we have a special additional prize for you today. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. And with that, everyone, why don't we get to today's content? I want to start this by setting the table a little bit for today's presentation from Quest. I have some slides that will provide kind of a topical overview of the material that our speaker is going to cover. So let's dive in. This is about data, and data growth through 2030, as you might expect, is going to explode. Now, I especially like this particular data point and how it's presented here. Data is expected to grow more than 10 times between 2020 and 2030. So we got about what? 6 years left or so. It'll reach 660 zettabytes. To put that in context, that is equivalent to 610 128 gigabyte iPhones per person. That's a nice way to sort of personalize it and maybe give some numbers that we can actually get our heads around. So yeah, the data growth is going to be gigantic. Or we should say ginormous this time of year. All right. And when that data is lost, well, the consequences can be dire for companies. According to NIST, you see the quote there about the increased risk for not having backup systems in place or not having them properly set up. You can see some of the main negatives there: loss of productivity, revenue, and customer loss, negative reputation and brand impacts. And those are just a few. As you well know, the negative consequences can go much deeper than that for data loss. All right. And that brings us to object storage and keeping your data in that particular format and some of the advantages that has. You can see again some of those there: scalability, cost efficiency, simplicity, and ease of management, unstructured data support, durability, and reliability. Those are all some advantages of object storage. There are more again, but as I mentioned, this is kind of a high-level overview, and we're just going to hit some of the high points there for object storage advantages. Okay, so you've got to move your backup data to the cloud. We're going to be talking about that today. Well, it's not easy. You know, it's something that I think companies need to do by and large, most of them, but it's not the simplest thing in the world. You have to assess your data. You have to choose a provider. You have to plan how you're going to get it from your on premises resources up into the cloud in either fully public or some sort of a hybrid methodology there. You got to get the data ready. That can be much more complicated than people think to prep that data. And then once you move the data, you've got to monitor it while it's happening to make sure it gets transferred over properly. And then you have to verify that it all went over without errors and things like that that are going to totally screw everything up. So lots of challenges there. But we have help too. Now, once you get out there, then the first thing people want to know is how do you control those cloud costs? You may have heard of cloud sticker shock, right? It's that first month's bill that often will take the wind out of a CISO or someone else responsible for cloud costs when they didn't realize this is going to be as expensive as it actually is when they see that bill. You got to do things like monitor your usage, optimize those data transfers, especially data egress, which is where you get hit with a lot of the biggest charges. You need a solid data management strategy. You need to use tiering in a lot of cases as well, so you're not paying huge upfront costs for all of the data that you have there. And you need to make it as small as you can with compression and encryption where practical. Okay, now that leads us to keys to an agile backup solution. What does this look like, right? You've got all that stuff in backup. How do you make sure the backup solution is going to do what you want? You don't want it to be static, right? So you're not going to want it tied to hardware. You want a nice smooth workflow, you know, up to the public cloud, back down to on-prem, back and forth, making sure that everything runs well. That is much harder than you might think. You need rapid recovery and restoration. Don't forget, if your backups cannot be restored quickly, what's really the point of having them, right? And your agile backup solution needs to be adaptable to changing needs, because we are in the era of fast change with the cloud, with cloud native development and containers and all of those things that move much faster than they used to do. You've got to have an agile backup solution. And finally, here in our overview is the 3-2-1 rule. Is that still effective? Probably most of you on here know the 3-2-1 rule. That's three. You need to have at least 3 copies of your data on at least 2 different storage media and at least 1 copy of those off-site. And look at the bottom there. It says these are minimums, and I would agree with that. Is that still something that we need to pay attention to? I think the answer is a big yes, and we can go further than what you see here, but I do think that this is kind of table stakes here. This is what you need to do at a very minimum. So with that really quick overview, I wanted to now introduce our speaker for today. Really excited to bring him on. He is Peter DeVenta. He is a data protection EMEA pre-sales manager for Quest, and I'm been talking with him a little bit before the event today. He's a real expert in this, and I'm delighted to have him on. And right now, Peter, I am going to turn this show over to you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Thank you very
All
much.
All right. Great. Glad to have you here. And you now have the mic.
All right. Thank you. As you can hear my accent, I'm from Europe. EMEA is a little bit of Europe. And yeah, so I'm working for Quest for 17 years now, in the industry for more than 25 years. So yeah, so my background is going back far, but also the topic of today shows that a lot of things happened in those 25 years. So let me get into that. Right, the topic is cloud data cost management. The whole idea, of course, is that looking at where can you store your data the cheapest. For a long time, cloud was the obvious go-to place. But after a couple of years of experience, we now can notice that it's not by default the cheapest way to store your data if you do it the wrong way. So how can you do it better? First of all, if I step back the 25 years I'm in this industry, then how did we store data over the past time? This is not specifically only about business kind of data, but we all started with video cassettes and whatever to get our movies done. We were using floppy disks, or later on the hard disks, like that's on the left or on the right picture. And I don't know what your age is, but I have used a lot of those. And then suddenly you have the USB sticks, and they could get as much on it as that stack of disks. So we moved along, not only because we had more data, but we also found that data could be stored more efficient. And going further, I mean, for changes we've seen in the market the last time, I didn't know, but my colleague told me that Netflix started with an operation of sending DVDs. I never seen that, but it happened. And then something happened in the business of Netflix, and they decided that sending DVDs was not scalable, and they moved to online. So the streaming kicked in, and you might know that most of your pictures you're looking or videos are probably stored on tape somewhere. Right. So the question is, Netflix is all about streaming, and where do we now try to store our data? And the topic is clear. Cloud seems to be a very good candidate to move ahead and store data. Might not always be everything you own. There are, of course, companies that have a cloud only strategy. Most customers or most enterprises or most businesses are still in the hybrid situation, where there's a part of them data is still on-prem, moving stuff into a cloud environment. So time is changing. You might say, what about tape? Tape is still there. Tape is still a good candidate for storing data. But if you have experience with tape, you also know there's a lot of manual activities around it. So it's not always the most flexible solution possible. So we will focus on cloud today. The whole thing is about how can we make sure that we don't spend or forget why we spend the money or where we do spend the money. So I have an example here. It's an obvious company that creates huge amounts of data. Here's an example of what they did for a specific project. And they got in touch with AWS, and they ended up with an environment or an estimated environment of many hundreds of petabytes to be stored in the Amazon environment. It was planned for 15 missions for in the future and current, and it would generate more or less 100 terabytes per day. So good deal for Amazon, because they had this set for 65 million per year, dollars, that is. So all good until they forgot one thing, and that was, if you store something in the cloud, you might also want to read something from the cloud. And that was not taken into account. So this project ended up with another bill of another 30 million of egress cost per year. So instead of looking at a 65, it suddenly became a 100 million deal. Why? Forgot about egress. So if you go into cloud, what is your plan? Store it and leave it, or read it and do something with it. So you have to get the complete picture clear for yourself. Right. Going a little bit further into the topic we want to talk about, that is a specific solution we sell, we created within Quest, and that is a software solution. So there are a lot of solutions out there using appliances to store data as efficient as possible. The big difference with our solution is it is software. You can store it on a virtual machine. Of course, you can store it on a physical machine. Why not? Or you can store it in a cloud environment. So you will get with CoreStore a software package that you can tailor exactly to your taste how you want to deploy it. Right, what is CoreStore? This is a busy slide. I will not try to touch everything, but I'm very happy about this slide because it shows what we can do. So get in back. Remember that the cloud, the CoreStore, is a software package. So what can we do with the software package? Of course, the most important thing what we're looking for is reducing data footprint. We use a deduplication technique for that. You might say, right, deduplication, I know that. But that's not really true because deduplication is a technique. And there are different ways how you can deduplicate data. The way you analyze, the way you store, the way you describe your metadata, it's not a standard. So deduplication can be done in a different way. The way we do it in CoreStore is a mechanism that's on the market for 10 years at the moment. So we know how to do it. The 20-to-1 is something you can achieve. If you want to get that in percentages, it's 95% reduction of your data. Do you get that from day one? No. I don't want to make you happy with something that you cannot achieve from day one. The 95% reduction you will get over time. As you know, backup data is two things. It's quite repetitive. It reads everything you have, even if you have it stored multiple times, and it's quite static. So that is really what we need with deduplication. So day one, yes, we will reduce your data. But if you keep it for a longer time, if you have multiple generations of backups, you will see that the number of the rate of deduplication will go up to 20-to-1 or better. Depends all on the data set you have. It's important to note that there is also, of course, data around there that has less deduplicational capabilities. As you might know, if you store pictures or movies or whatever, not all formats of those have good deduplication. So check out exactly what kind of data you have. Talk to us, we know it, and we can tell you upfront what you can expect from CoreStore. So that's the deduplication part. Good stuff. You don't want it to be slow, so we also have it made this way that it can do the deduplication very fast. So the 20 terabyte per hour means that we find huge amounts of non-unique data, so we don't have to store it again. We just have to analyze it and discard it if it's not unique. And we can do it in such a way that we can do it very fast. Backup agnostic means for us that CoreStore must be seen as a backup target. If you're from the old years or old days like me, you could say CoreStore is like a intelligent tape. If you're a little bit younger, then you might say this is a disk with a little bit of intelligence behind it. It's all true. And all have a single point of failure. If you throw away your CoreStore environment for whatever reason and you have no copy, you lost everything. So it's always important to think of a second copy. For that, we have different techniques for it. Keith already mentioned, of course, the 3-to-1 rule. CoreStore fits in that rule perfectly. One of the mechanisms with a core store is replication. So you could have another data center. If you own multiple data centers, you could have another data center where you could have another core store instance, and we will set up replication between the two. Or we can have like a star mechanism, have multiple core stores replicate to one single one. Everything is possible. When we do that, we apply global deduplication. So global deduplication means that if we've seen the data before within a core store, we don't store it again. So that even goes as far as you have like multiple core stores replicating to a single core store. Then that single core store can already tell the others, I have seen that data before, even though that a specific core store might not have sent it earlier, but another one did send it earlier. So it's really good. Where do you deduplicate? Where do you start doing that? You might say, as soon as it hits core store, I want to have it deduplicated and compressed. But that could mean that you have to send it over the network first. But you don't have to. We have specific accelerators, we call them protocol accelerators, that can already deduplicate and compress even before your data hits the network on its way to core store. And that will speed up a lot of things. Less bandwidth need, very efficient storage, because the analyzing power will be spread over your environment instead of having core store do everything. It will have multiple entry points that already decided what is unique and not, or what's not. Right, more things in this slide. I will skip a couple. What of course is important is security. Security on different levels. First of all, encryption is mandatory. If you don't have encryption and you're using a network that might be spied upon or sniffed upon, then you have a risk. So we support both in-flight and at rest. In-flight, of course, means anything that has been sent through the core store environment will be encrypted. Anything that is stored within the core store environment will also be encrypted. That is called at rest. So you know upfront that sniffing will not make any sense. Or even if you would have a physical core store and someone would steal a disk from you, it's unreadable. That's the simplest way of protecting your data, but you have to do more. Access to core store can be set in with multi-factor authentication. So more or less it would mean that stealing credentials from an administrator or someone else with the right credentials is not enough to get access to the core store environment. That's the second level of security. The third level, of course, is about the data. We're all very aware that ransomware attacks are just around the corner. So you have to do something, and that something could be like, okay, I need to prepare myself on the fact that I will be attacked. So what can I do to protect my backup data? The obvious thing we use is object locking or immutability. It sounds very simple, but it's very strong in how it can protect your data. Immutability object locking is a mechanism that you give a specific retention time to data. That retention time could be, of course, very much in line with the retention times of your backup software. But the big difference is that if you let your backup software decide what needs to be kept and what needs to be deleted, then there is a risk that if someone has access to the backup software, it can overrule that and just delete the whole stuff. With immutability on storage level, you overcome that issue by saying the storage level now decides if it's being if it's possible to manipulate or delete that data. So even though the backup software might say delete it or change it, it cannot be done. It's the storage layer, in this case, it's CoreStore, that will prohibit any changes on that data. There's also a little bit of a risk with that in the old days, if you made a mistake as an administrator, you just throw away the backup, I will do a new one, forget about it. If you set the immutability, it will be there for the time you have set it. Good thing about immutability, you can change it. You might say, that's really strange. Immutability you can change. I don't know how well you are informed about object locking, but there are a couple of different mechanisms in there. The most obvious mechanism is that you, okay, I don't know what happened, but my screen died. Okay. Sorry. One moment. Okay. Am I back on? I think I am. I'm sorry. There was some glitch on my side. I think maybe I didn't touch the keyboard enough. It went to sleep mode. Anyway, I was telling you about immutability, that are different versions in that. And that means that the obvious one are you lock it and that's it. But that's not flexible enough, because there are so many different types of software that want to store something and don't want to keep like a form of metadata beside that real data. And if you lock it, then even the metadata cannot be used. So for many of those products, object locking is totally unusable. So within object locking, there is a functionality called versioning. And versioning means that you are able to change data, but it's not really a change. It's just a new version next to the existing version. So it looks like you could change the data, but on the storage level, you don't. And that is, of course, something that is very handy if you have software that wants to manipulate a little bit of metadata. I don't know what kind of backup software you're using, but there are some there that really wants to do that, and they really need to have versioning as an object locking mechanism. Right. We do have other security measurements. So object locking is really tied to what we call the S3 protocol. And the S3 protocol is something that offers that locking mechanism. We also support from CoreStore other mechanisms to store data like SMB or NFS. And for those protocols, we support something called the recycle bin. So if someone would delete something from CoreStore using a share, then it will end up in the recycle bin. You can't manipulate the recycle bin. You can only restore from the recycle bin. So there is no credential, there's no account that has influence on immutability on the recycle bin within CoreStore. Making sure that you have it the best security possible. You might say, what about cloud? Because we are talking about cloud, are we? I say yes. So what CoreStore can do is store your data. It could be an on-prem solution, and move your data to a cloud environment. I have more slides for that, so I will come to that in a bit. Right, so let me move on, otherwise I will stay on this topic forever. This is my sweet spot, of course. So look at optimizing the data itself. So I have a little bit of an example of how CoreStore is doing that. So first of all, we look at the on-prem environment. So we call it system. In this example, you can see we have stored an amount of data of more than 300 terabyte of data on it. Let's say that is your backup data, your daily backups, your monthly backups, whatever, different sources, all right to CoreStore. That data is analyzed and could be reduced by using deduplication technology and ends up in 7.7 terabyte. That's the only part that's really unique. That data could still be compressed by normal compression techniques as we have for many years. So this example, it will end up in a 98 plus reduction of the storage. So we went from 300 something terabyte to 4 terabyte. This is on site, on your local disk. What happens if you use CoreStore to move that data to a cloud environment? So in this same example, we have connected our CoreStore also to cloud. Could be any cloud. We support a list of different cloud vendors that are well known, but we also support any S3 compatible environment. Same applies here. We have sent almost 300 terabytes to this cloud location. It's the raw data. But also in this cloud location, we applied deduplication and went from 200 something to 4.8 terabyte. Applied again the compression on it and stored 2.4. So in fact, we moved 300 terabyte back into 2.4 terabyte of storage. That means a lot of reduction, more than we normally promise you, but it's possible. Why not? And this also means that you pay only for the 2.4 terabyte in the cloud. You don't pay for the 300 terabyte. Yes, you have a potential of 300 terabyte of restorable data, but it's not there. It's just 2.4 that's really unique. Right. How would that look like if you compared it with real cloud environments? So what I've done is took the an example of 500 terabyte that we need to store in a cloud environment. We will go with 5% egress cost. You need to restore something. It's not like NASA, but we need to restore something. So it's 5% egress cost. That will end up for Wasabi, Amazon, Azure, and Google Cloud for this number of estimated cloud costs per year. You could have a good deal with them like NASA and you have a better price. But if you take the prices published by those providers, you will get this. If you would use CoreStore in the equation, then we of course reduce that data a lot. But not the only thing we do. We also have what we call the intelligent egress. The reason behind it is that you can say that you don't want to move everything to the cloud and remove it from on-prem, but you can keep a little bit of data on-prem. If you are in the backup world, you will know that most of your restores will be anything of the last 30 days. Sometimes someone comes and says, I need something about half a year ago, but 99% of your restore will be of something of the last 30 days. So if you keep 30 days of history on local disk and put everything else on the cloud also, so it's double copy, then you will have very little egress cost compared to move everything to the cloud. And here you see the reduction of what happens with CoreStore or without. To be honest, it says 95% cloud cost reduction. We have to make a living, so CoreStore is not free of charge. So if we would give it away for free, you would have a 95%. If you take in account that CoreStore also costs money, maybe you want to run it as a virtual machine, maybe you want to run it as a physical machine, you have to get a little bit of cost for that in there. So your real cloud cost in a scenario like this would be around 65-70%, because you also have a part of the investment in the CoreStore environment. Again, it's still a lot of reduction. Sorry, I clicked too fast. So a little bit of examples of how you could set up CoreStore. The top one, using different protocols, using a virtual machine runs CoreStore on-prem. That's fine. And another example using CoreStore on a hardware server. If you are a little bit curious, this is without a specific reason. This is a Veeam example, so Veeam backup. Veeam backup use proxies, and they can all write to CoreStore at the same time. As you might know, Veeam is using deduplication per backup job. We don't care. You can have 100 different Veeam backup jobs. We will just do global deduplication on them anyway. So you could have on-prem a virtual machine running CoreStore or a hardware machine running CoreStore, and you could have something in a cloud environment. What you could set up is what we call replication. So only unique data is sent to the cloud, and there you go. We will store it in the cheapest possible storage in the cloud. In the beginning, Keith talked about tiering. Use tiering. We support tiering mechanisms in the cloud, hot, cold, warm, whatever you have. We can follow suit with our CoreStore to find the best place to store your data and make it as financially interesting as possible. If you put everything in hot storage in a cloud, you pay a lot of money. If you have the possibility to put it in warm or cold storage, then you pay a lot less to store the same data. There are a little bit of constraints around that, but we are trying to build that constraints knowledge into CoreStore, so CoreStore can make sure that your data is stored on the right place. Right. So what else can you do with CoreStore? We can also use a cloud tier mechanism. So instead of replication, we can use a cloud tier where we can use a policy where we say, okay, if data or backups are, I don't know, 30 days old, move a copy to the cloud and remove the on-prem copy, for example. So you could have a situation that on site you have 30 days of history, in the cloud you have 10 years of history. That's all fine. It's managed by CoreStore. Your backup application does not need to do anything. Now, what happens if something goes wrong with CoreStore? We talked about the 3-2-1 rule. It's for a specific reason. This could happen. So what we have built into CoreStore is the possibility to fire up a virtual CoreStore. Could be in the cloud. Should be in the cloud is easiest because you have to copy also in the cloud, of course. What we can do with CoreStore in this scenario is just get back what we call the metadata, describing how your data, the 300 terabyte, was stored in 2.8 terabyte. You can describe that in metadata. Just get the metadata back, and within no time you have full access to all your 300 terabyte in the cloud, and be able to restore anything you would need. And there you go. So this is an example with the 3-2-1 and why you need 3-2-1, but also how it will work in practice, that we already thought about it, that you might need this in case of a disaster. Right, I already talked about it a little bit. Where do you deploy the stuff? It could be on a hardware machine. It could be on, oh, sorry, this is I did a mistake about my slides ordering. This is how we talked about earlier, is how can we do intelligent egress? Here's an example. I have a CoreStore, in this case it's a hardware-based CoreStore, and I have a connection to Wasabi as an example. We use the cloud tier mechanism, so based on a policy, I send data based on age to the cloud environment. So what will happen in time is that blocks are both on-prem and in the cloud, but I could say clean up the CoreStore if data is a specific age. So what then will happen is you will get a restore request. That restore request asks for a couple of blocks. As you might know, we don't store files as files, we store files as unique blocks of data. So that's a big difference. So if you have a restore request, for us, it means you will request is about blocks. So as you might see that all the blocks, if you notice quickly, all the blocks on the restore request are on-prem except an orange one. So what will happen is that CoreStore will immediately be able to share all those blocks that are already on the on-prem disk. There is no egress at all. And only the orange block that was missing is retrieved from Wasabi. By the way, Wasabi normally doesn't have egress cost, but anyway, that's a different story. But if you would have some egress cost, it will be a minimum or as optimal as possible. And you'll get it back, and there you go. Okay, this was my slide I thought I would have earlier. So you can deploy it on hardware. Why would you like to do that? I'm a big fan of trying to separate production environments with backup or data protection environments. There is technically no reason for it not to do it, or to have your CoreStore completely integrated in your production environment. Why not? That's fine. But if you think about the different scenarios where you want to protect yourself against, then if you have a possibility to separate production from protection, do so. That might mean you need a hardware box for it. But we can also have no issue with it if you would deploy it as a virtual machine. We see this happening with customers that have a larger central location and amount of satellite offices that do have some form of production, but not huge amount of data. They can run the virtual core stores on the locations and they replicate back to the hardware deployment on the central site, for example. And of course, we support the cloud environment also with Core. So if you would go to Microsoft Marketplace or Amazon Marketplace and you type in Core Store, you will see that we already have those instances for you there to deploy and use. The only thing you only need to have is a Core Store license. Right. So quick summary. What do we do with Core Store? We protect your data not only based on access, but also with encryption, with immutability or object locking. We do this for the whole chain. If your backup software would tell CoreStore, please keep this data immutable for, I don't know, 6 weeks, then it will be immutable on CoreStore and it will be immutable on the cloud that will be behind CoreStore if you want to use cloud behind CoreStore. Of course, that's not mandatory, but it's possible. I didn't mention it, but a single CoreStore environment can connect to 2 clouds at the same time. So you could have a multi-cloud strategy in your environment. Then for CoreStore, it's easy to help you with that because you don't need different CoreStores to connect to different clouds at the same time. I showed you how we can reduce the storage cost or usage, and therefore also the cost, of course. We think that we can help you to deploy and complete your 3-2-1 strategy or any other strategy you have, to go to cloud strategy you might have, etc. We simplify for you to get to the cloud. All the knowledge that is needed to write data to cloud, to manage it, etc., 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 it's all built into CoreStore. The only thing you need is a storage account, period. We do the rest. Right. I showed you just how we can accelerate the restore from cloud by doing intelligent egress. And I talked about the immutability. We think that with CoreStore, you can have an agile solution that fits your need probably today, but will certainly be able to fit your needs tomorrow, as the software is set up in such a way For example, today we support 2 clouds at the same time. We are thinking of new functionality of CoreStore. I cannot say out loud today, but they all have to do with ransomware attacks and how to deal with it. CoreStore will play also a crucial role for you in that part of your environment. It can already do that with immutability, but we will add more very intelligent stuff around that. Okay, then I come to this one. So I just learned this, for me it's evening, call to action, CTA. Couple of things you can do. So if you're really interested in to know more, then make sure you go to quest.com and find with the solution set, look for CoreStore. You will find a complete page around everything with all the data around that, data sheets, white papers, etc., etc. We also can offer you today a possibility to give you insight in how much storage cost, cloud cost you could reduce using CoreStore. So we will do an exercise together with you to gather information about your need for backup or whatever you would need in cloud. What would happen if you do that and store that in cloud without CoreStore, and what would be the equation be if you use CoreStore in that scenario, and including, of course, the cost of CoreStore to have a real analysis that makes sense and not just nice numbers. Okay, I come to the end, Keith.
Okay. Wow. Thank you so much, Peter. Great, great information. Some really valuable stuff and necessary in the current age we're living in, where cybersecurity threats are just everywhere and costs are top of mind for every company that we have. I wanted to mention one thing here, and then I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. Your presentation was so thorough that that we don't have time for a lot of questions, but don't fear. If you've asked a question today for Quest, they will follow up with every question that was asked today. So don't worry about that. If your question doesn't get answered, and frankly, we won't get to answer many of them, you will hear back from Quest. So sit tight and wait, and they will get in touch to answer that and any other questions that you have. So as I mentioned, Peter, just time for a couple of questions here. And here's one about the learning curve for Quest. The question is, how simple is this really? Recovering backups from the cloud can be complex. For example, downloading everything before you start, that can be expensive with egress costs. And I mentioned that up front, that the egress costs are one of those hidden things that can really bite you. So what is the learning curve with Quest?
Yeah, good question. So I mentioned it that maybe it sounds simple, but it's not simple. We don't store files. So a backup normally, if you take any backup solution, they create huge big files. So you do a backup of a virtual machine or a couple of machines, you will end up with a huge file with all the backup data in single thing. You send that file, or this file is sent to CoreStore, but we chop it up. If we move that to the cloud in a later stage and you want to do a restore, then the request we will get is a request for blocks and not for that file. It might be a file that is being requested, but we don't care. We will translate that file request into block request. And with the way we set up CoreStore with the cloud policy mechanism, where you put a huge amount of history in the cloud, but you keep the most live data, your most recent backups, also as a copy on on-prem, we will be able to reduce the egress cost, even if your backup software demands the whole backup file back before it can retrieve a single file. We will take care of that problem.
That is fantastic to hear, and I'm sure creates a lot of peace of mind for the attendees. So I think we can fit in just like one more question here today, and then we're going to have to start wrapping this. I wanted to mention also one more time about the handout from Quest that you can find in the handout section. They do have that PDF, and it's on how to reduce backup storage costs in the cloud with Quest's core store. So make sure you download that handout before we're done today, which is going to be just a few minutes from now. So a final question for you, Peter. And again, one more reminder that Quest will be following up on any questions that we didn't get to today. So the question is, can I use faster hardware to improve speed of recoveries here?
Yes and no. Faster hardware will help for anything that's still stored local. We have a possibility in Core Store that if you would install it on a physical machine, a server, and you would have the possibility to add some SSD drives to that environment, then in Core Store you can point to that SSD capacity, as we call it, a performance tier. So you could choose that the most critical machines you have will end up with their data on those SSD drives, and the less critical would end up on, let's call them, the normal drives you would have in a server. So if the time comes that you have a disaster and you would need to have that data as fast as possible, some features in backup software being called like instant recover, we would perfectly cope with that need of speed with that environment. The no that I said is for cloud. For cloud, we are depending on the bandwidth of your cloud connection. So we will try to do intelligent egress as possible. But if someone wants something that's really old, like a year old, and that's 100% in cloud, we are still depending on the bandwidth of your cloud connection. We can't, faster hardware will not make your bandwidth faster.
Sure. Okay. You know what? I'm going to do one more here because we got a very nice request from Victor, who has been asking a number of questions and asked very nicely, could we please take one from him before we're done today? So we're going to do that right now. This is for you, Victor and Peter. So this will be our last question for today. Victor wants to know, how secure is the encryption? Because even encrypted data can be decrypted and hacked into. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, we use different mechanisms of encryption. To be honest, I don't know 100% where we use what, but I do know that, for example, our in-flight is 256 bit, and I think our REST is 1024-bit encryption. So depending on what we need to do, we try to find the balance between encrypting and speed. For REST, we don't need speed, so we can do better encryption on that level. I hope, Victor, that makes sense for you.
Sure. All right. Very good. That was for you, Victor. Peter, we are out of time right now. I want to thank you so much for being on with us today, for that excellent presentation, for everything we learned from it. I sure learned a lot, and I think all of us did today. And one final reminder that Quest will be following up on any questions we didn't get to. So, Peter, thank you again for your time and for your presentation. It was a delight to have you on.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. And with that, we are just about wrapped for today. I have one more piece of business to take care of, however, and that is the Amazon gift card giveaway. I mentioned at the beginning that is $250, and you do have to be present for the entire event to be eligible to win that gift card. And we do have a winner for today, and that is Mark Puhala from Pennsylvania. Congratulations to you, Mark. We will be in touch ASAP to get you your card. And with that, everyone, we are out of here. On behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Quest for making this event possible. And I want to thank all of you attendees for being here with us today, for your wonderful engagement with the material. You guys were asking great questions all throughout, and we just love to see that. And it was just so much fun to be here with you. Thank you for spending part of your day with us, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next event. That's it. Have a great rest of your day, folks.